Everyone wanted to know who did the dog belong to. The tag was gone. The chip was never there. But then a name was found, scratched into an old scrap of leather. Bailey belongs to Elsie. And just when Lauren thought she had solved the mystery, a boy named Noah whispered that the dog used to be his, too. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. The spring rain had only just stopped falling in Willow Creek, Oregon, a modest town nestled between fir-covered hills and the low hum of the Willamette River. The streets still glistened with the sheen of rainfall, and the gray clouds lingered in slow retreat. Cool air clung to the sidewalks like memory, moist, heavy, reluctant to leave. That morning, as the mist curled around the rooftops and puddles reflected the early light, a golden retriever sat unmoving in front of a small house on Juniper Lane. The dog was soaked. His golden coat turned a dull amber from the rain, but it clung to him with a strange elegance. He didn't shiver, he didn't bark, he just sat. His posture was noble, yet defeated, like a soldier waiting for orders long past due. His eyes, a dark mahogany, weren't fixed on anything in particular, but they held the weight of something more than just weariness. A silent kind of grief. Lauren Mitchell noticed him as she stepped out of her car near the Willow Creek Animal Outreach Center. She had just pulled in for her morning volunteer shift. A thermos of coffee in one hand, car keys in the other. She stopped mid-step. Her brow furrowed as she looked at the dog across the street. Something in his stillness was wrong, or perhaps too right to ignore. Lauren was 29 tall, and always a little rushed in movement, like someone trying to outrun her own thoughts. She wore her copper hair pulled into a loose bun and rarely wore makeup. Her gray hoodie bore the faded paw print logo of the Outreach Center, and her jeans were always frayed at the knees. A kind heart with a sharp intuition. That's how people described her, and they weren't wrong. Years ago, her younger brother had disappeared while hiking alone. Never found since then. Lauren had carried a quiet sensitivity toward the lost, be they people or animals. She crossed the street slowly and crouched down a few feet away from the dog. "Hey there, buddy," she said softly. "You waiting for someone?" The dog didn't flinch. He just blinked once, his gaze unwavering. Lauren noticed the soaked leash trailing behind him. No collar, no tags. She reached into her backpack for a spare slip lead and looped it gently around his neck. Still, he didn't resist. He stood up on his own, heavy and dignified, and followed her like he had been waiting for someone to finally say his name. Lauren led him through the gates of the center, where the morning was beginning in earnest. Staff and volunteers moved between kennels and intake rooms, voices blending with the occasional bark or clanging gate. She headed straight for the intake bay, where Sarah Reynolds was prepping the new arrivals. Sarah was in her early 50s, tall and thin, with hair the color of storm clouds and lines on her face carved by years of caretaking. She wore a forest green vest with too many pockets, and moved with the precision of someone who never wasted a second. Sarah had once been a schoolteacher before the car crash that took her husband and son. After that, she gave up everything except her work at the center. Animals didn't ask questions. She often said they just needed you to show up. Lauren approached her. "Sarah, we've got someone new." Sarah looked up from her clipboard and froze when she saw the dog. Her tone softened. "Where'd you find him just sitting on a porch down Juniper? No tag, no chip, but he's not your usual stray." Sarah knelt down and examined him briefly. He's a golden, Around 6, maybe 7, good build, no signs of malnourishment, clean teeth, well-groomed before the rain hit. Someone cared for him. Recently, the dog gave a soft huff but made no sound beyond that. "What's his name?" Sarah asked. Lauren shook her head. "No ID. I was thinking. Bailey." The name felt natural. The dog looked up at the sound, head tilting just slightly. It was as close to agreement as they could hope for. "All right," Sarah said. Noting it down, "Bailey it is." Later that morning, Bailey was settled into one of the quieter kennels, the ones they reserved for older or more sensitive animals. He didn't pace, didn't bark, he just sat, watching the fence like he was waiting for it to open to something more than just a courtyard. Lauren visited his kennel twice before noon, bringing soft treats and sitting silently beside him. When she pressed her palm against the chain link, Bailey responded with the faintest lean of his head, resting it momentarily against her fingers. It was the kind of contact that said everything without sound. Across town, another morning was unfolding under the same gray sky, in a modest beige house with a green mailbox and wind chimes that never stopped tinkling. 8-year-old Noah Campbell sat curled up on the couch. His legs were drawn to his chest, and he held a worn blue blanket close to his face. Beside him, his mother, Angela, watched silently. Angela Campbell was in her late 30s, with warm eyes framed by dark circles and a voice always one step away from cracking. She had once been a family therapist before she had to quit and to care for Noah full-time. He hadn't spoken since Max died 3 months ago. Max, the golden retriever therapy dog who had been with them since Noah was 4, had passed unexpectedly from kidney failure. Since then, the light in Noah's eyes had dimmed. He didn't scream, he didn't cry, he just stopped talking. Angela reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of Noah's chestnut hair behind his ear. "We could go for a walk today," she said. "Maybe down by the rescue center. Would you like that?" No response. Noah just rocked slightly, not in rejection, but in the slow rhythm of self-soothing. Angela stood and went to the kitchen. On the fridge was a drawing Noah had made the month Max died. It was a stick figure holding hands with a dog under a sun that had a single gray cloud. She looked at it and whispered, "I don't know how to reach you anymore. Willow Creek, Oregon, mid-April." Early afternoon. The clouds had finally scattered across the Oregon sky, revealing gentle sunlight that bathed the town of Willow Creek in a soft, golden hue. Spring had taken its rightful place again after several days of gray drizzle. Trees that lined the sidewalk swayed lightly in the breeze, and the scent of blooming magnolias danced with the earthy aftermath of rain from the modest red brick building of the Willow Creek Animal Outreach Center. The air smelled faintly of cedarwood, wet soil, and a hint of antiseptic. Inside kennel number 7, Bailey lay on his side, ears flicking gently, eyes half-lidded but watchful. The 6-year-old golden retriever had dried from the rainstorm a day earlier, his coat returning to its pale honey luster, smooth and brushed back over his shoulders like golden silk, though his fur gleamed again and his tail wagged gently when approached. Something in his eyes remained, displaced. He would lie still for long periods, lifting his head only when someone passed, watching, not fearfully, but as though trying to recognize a face he'd once known. Lauren Mitchell stood beside his kennel now, kneeling with a soft brush in one hand. She was back in her regular weekend attire, dark jeans, a beige utility shirt rolled at the sleeves, and her hair pulled tight into a low braid. Her posture was firm but gentle as she brushed behind Bailey's ear. her lips moving softly as she murmured to him. She always spoke to the dogs, even the ones who didn't understand or respond. But Bailey, she swore, listened, as she ran the brush gently down the side of his neck. Her hand paused over a small bump beneath his fur, near the base of his throat. Curious, she set the brush down and used her fingers to part the thick hair. There, barely visible beneath the golden coat, was a narrow patch of scarred skin. Faint discoloration ringed the area, like a collar had once rubbed there for a long time. But that wasn't what made Lauren freeze. Embedded slightly beneath the scar tissue, as if long forgotten, was a tiny corner of cracked leather. She carefully tugged at it, and out slipped a weathered scrap of leather, brittle and curled from time. Pressed faintly into the surface were the fading words, "Bailey belongs to Elsie." Lauren sat back on her heels. "Elsie," she whispered. "Is that who you're waiting for?" The next hour was a blur of digital sleuthing. Lauren returned to the center's small staff office, sat in front of the old desktop computer with its humming tower, and opened the shelter's social media page. She uploaded a new post with a recent photo of Bailey, his soulful eyes gazing past the fence, and added a brief message. "Does anyone recognize this beautiful boy? We found a worn tag fragment hidden in his fur, stamped Bailey belongs to Elsie. We believe someone out there might still be missing him. Please share." The post went live at 2:04 p.m. By 2:27 it had been shared 12 times. By 3:50, comments began rolling in. Most were just kind words or general sentiments. But one, from a user named Dorothy Henley, caught Lauren's attention. "This dog looks like the one I used to see walking with a little brown-haired girl down Sycamore Avenue almost every afternoon. Thought they moved months ago." Lauren clicked on Dorothy's profile. The woman appeared to be in her 70s, with pictures of a garden full of tulips and an old beagle named Sherman. Lauren messaged her immediately. "Hi, Dorothy, I'm the volunteer who posted about Bailey. Can you tell me more about the girl you saw? Do you remember her name?" while waiting for a response. Lauren leaned back in the worn office chair, chewing her lip in thought. The name Elsie nagged at her. It wasn't a common name for children these days. Maybe it would be easier to trace. She got up and returned to Bailey's kennel. He was sitting upright now, ears perked just slightly. "Hey," she said, crouching again. "We might be getting somewhere." She reached through the gate, and Bailey pressed his head gently into her hand. That evening, as the sun began to slide behind the treetops of Willow Creek, Angela Campbell decided to take Noah for a walk. The 8-year-old had been quiet as always, a small figure in a pale gray hoodie and jeans, arms tucked into his sleeves, his gaze fixed to the pavement. He hadn't spoken since Max, his therapy dog, had passed. Months of silence had built a cocoon around him, one Angela was desperate to break through. Angela was 38, slender and graceful in a way softened by motherhood. Her once auburn curls were darker now, tied up as always in a practical bun. Her eyes were tired, but still alive with fierce maternal resolve. "We'll just walk near the shelter, sweetheart," she said as they approached the fence. "They have a few new dogs. We don't have to go in, just look." As they passed the chain-link enclosures, Noah dragged behind, but something shifted when they neared Bailey's kennel. Angela felt the slack in his grip vanish. Noah had stopped. Bailey had also stood. The boy and the dog simply stared at one another, one through metal fencing, the other through eyes that had seen too many goodbyes. Bailey didn't bark or pace. He walked forward and sat, his tail slowly wagging side to side. Angela held her breath. Noah took one step closer, then another. A small smile, barely there, lifted one corner of his mouth. It was the first time in weeks he had shown any visible emotion. Angela knelt next to him, blinking quickly. "That's Bailey," she said softly. "Would you like to come see him again tomorrow?" Noah didn't answer, but he didn't look away. That night, back at the shelter, Lauren checked her messages again. Dorothy Henley had replied. "I don't remember the girl's name exactly, but I remember her calling the dog Bailey. Her house was 3 doors down from mine on Sycamore, a white 2-story with blue shutters. The girl always wore this yellow backpack. I haven't seen her since December." Lauren opened Google Maps, Sycamore Avenue, a white 2-story with blue shutters. She leaned back and stared at the screen, whispering to herself, "We're getting closer." Bailey. The sun had barely risen over the tree-lined outskirts of Willow Creek, its warm light spilling gently across the gravel paths of the outreach center. The morning air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and damp grass, and the quiet hum of awakening wildlife. In kennel number 7, Bailey sat alert, not in tension but in gentle anticipation, his eyes trained on the gate. It was as if he already sensed that today. Something important was coming, inside the small office. Lauren sat at the desk, sipping her usual lukewarm black coffee from a chipped ceramic mug that read, "Rescue on, rest later." Her laptop was open, glowing with dozens of browser tabs. Between managing the morning feed schedule and planning enrichment activities for the weekend volunteers, she'd been watching the outreach post about Bailey go increasingly viral. Last night, a message had arrived, short but striking, from a woman named Claire Bennett. Lauren had immediately noticed the name Bennett. Her heart quickened when she read the message again. "Hi, the dog in your photo looks exactly like the one my younger sister Elsie used to have. His name was Bailey. We had to leave him behind last winter. Can I call you?" She'd replied instantly. "Now." Her phone buzzed gently on the desk. Lauren answered on the first ring. "Hi, this is Lauren Mitchell." A warm, slightly raspy voice came through. "Hi, it's Claire Bennett. Thank you for calling back." Claire, as it turned out, was in her early 30s and lived now in Eugene, Oregon. Her voice had the steadiness of someone used to carrying weight, but there was a weariness underneath, like someone who'd been strong too long for too many people. She explained that she used to live with her parents and younger sister in the outskirts of Willow Creek, not far from Sycamore Avenue. "We had 2 dogs," Claire said, "Bailey and Rusty. Rusty was older, a big red retriever mix. He sort of led the pack after Rusty passed. Something in Bailey changed. He started sneaking out. Not wild or destructive. He just left, always returned, but never the same." Her voice softened. "Elsie and Bailey were inseparable, but when my parents divorced, Mom and Elsie had to move back in with my grandmother. No pets allowed." Lauren's heart sank. She glanced at Bailey through the office window. He was lying down now, ears perked. Waiting. Claire continued. It was Elsie's decision. Actually, she said Bailey needed more than they could give. She cried for weeks. There was a pause. She still does. Lauren promised to follow up and asked if Elsie might want to reconnect. Claire hesitated. She's only 13, but maybe... Let me talk to Mom first. Later that afternoon, as promised. Noah Campbell returned to the center. He arrived wearing a navy blue hoodie and khaki shorts, his shoelaces uneven and his step cautious. Beside him walked Angela, her face drawn but hopeful. She hadn't told Noah they were visiting Bailey again until the last minute, afraid to raise expectations. But as they approached the enclosure, something in Noah's face lit up. The corners of his mouth twitched. His fingers clutched at the hem of his hoodie, and his eyes locked onto the dog that had, somehow, already sat upright. Bailey trotted to the gate, tail slowly wagging, posture low and calm. It wasn't the frenetic joy of a shelter dog hoping for adoption. It was familiarity. Noah walked closer. His voice caught between breath and hesitation. Goldie. The word was barely audible. Angela froze. Bailey tilted his head, ears forward, tail sweeping the floor. Then, without command, he lay down and offered his paw through the gate. Lauren, who had been watching from a distance, slowly approached. Did he just call him something she whispered to Angela? Angela nodded, her eyes wide. That's the first thing he said in 4 months. Lauren opened the kennel gate. Noah. Would you like to come in? Noah looked to his mother, then back to Bailey. He stepped forward inside the enclosure. Bailey didn't move. He waited, patient and warm, as the boy inched closer. Then, as Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, Bailey rested his head on the boy's knee and sighed, a low, long breath, like recognition. It was the kind of connection that bypassed words. From that moment on, Lauren began observing the two more intentionally. She noticed how Bailey adjusted his energy when around Noah. Unlike other dogs, he never jumped, barked, or begged. He remained present, anchored, responding more to Noah's silence than any command. When Noah grew restless, Bailey would walk a small circle around him, then sit beside him, grounding him. When Noah smiled, Bailey would lean gently, always with a slow thump of the tail. It was subtle, but unmistakable. One afternoon, as the boy and the dog sat in the grassy enclosure behind the main building, Sarah Reynolds stepped out to join Lauren on the bench nearby. Sarah had been watching the pair from a distance, but had said little so far. Tall and willowy, Sarah still walked with the careful balance of someone who carried both grace and grief. Her gray-blonde hair was always tucked into a braid, and her sleeves were often rolled neatly to the elbows. She had joined the center years earlier after losing her own teenage son to leukemia, a tragedy that had made her quiet but unflinchingly compassionate. "He's not just a pet," Sarah said, nodding toward Bailey. "That dog's got a heart tuned to grief. He knows what's broken." She glanced sideways. "I've only seen it a handful of times. When a dog recognizes something no human can say." Lauren nodded. "You think he was a therapy dog?" Sarah's brows rose, maybe not formally, but emotionally. Absolutely. The sun had started to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. Lauren stood and dusted off her jeans. "I think it's time we try something different." It was a soft, overcast afternoon in Willow Creek when the Bennetts returned. The sky wore a blanket of pale gray, and the scent of rain hovered, though none had yet fallen. The outreach center was quieter than usual. Even the dogs seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, their usual barks muted to distant murmurs. Inside kennel number 7, Bailey sat beside the gate, tail still, ears tilted forward, not excited, not anxious, but waiting. Claire Bennett stepped out of her mother's weathered blue sedan first. She wore a moss-green cardigan over a black shirt, her brown hair tied back in a clean knot, eyes scanning the shelter grounds with cautious recognition. Behind her emerged her mother, Mrs. Ann Bennett, a tall, slender woman in her late 40s with graying auburn hair, a thoughtful face, and a nervous habit of clutching her bag strap. But it was the third figure that Lauren focused on, a girl, 13, slim and pale, with wide hazel eyes, shoulder-length brown curls, and a backpack covered in hand-drawn patches. Elsie. She walked with her head down, her steps hesitant. There was no dramatic gasp, no sprint through the grass. She walked slowly, as if afraid the moment would vanish if she moved too fast, when Bailey saw her. He rose, walked forward, then stopped halfway. His tail wagged once, then paused. His body leaned forward with recognition, but his eyes flicked toward the courtyard where Noah and Angela had been standing minutes earlier. Elsie dropped to her knees. "Bailey," she said, her voice cracking. Bailey took one slow step, then another, and when he reached her, he pressed his head into her chest. Breathing her in, Elsie wrapped her arms around him and began to sob, not a loud wail, but the kind that builds over months of quiet missing. Claire knelt beside them, brushing a strand of hair from her sister's face. Lauren watched from a few steps away, a lump rising in her throat. She turned slightly and noticed Sarah standing farther back, observing silently with her arms crossed. Sarah gave a slow nod, an acknowledgement of something unspoken, but the moment shifted when a soft sound came from the courtyard. Lauren turned to see Noah standing at the fence, one hand gripping the chain link, eyes wide. Angela stood a step behind him, worry flickering across her brow. Bailey turned. His tail wagged again, a different rhythm now, shorter, unsure. He looked between Elsie and Noah, his body lowered slightly, as if trying to move in two directions at once. Elsie looked up. She saw Noah. They stared at each other for a long moment. Noah stepped back. He didn't run, but his eyes dimmed, and his body turned slowly toward the gate. Angela touched his shoulder gently, leading him away. Bailey made a small whine, one Elsie recognized instantly. "He remembers me," she whispered to Lauren, wiping her cheek. "But he remembers someone else, too." Lauren knelt beside her. "Elsie. There's something I need to tell you," she explained gently, carefully, about Noah, how he hadn't spoken since Max, how Bailey had become a lifeline, how their connection had changed everything. Elsie listened, biting her lower lip when Lauren finished. Claire placed a hand on her sister's shoulder. "We didn't know," she said softly. "We thought maybe he'd moved on, but he hasn't." A few days later, Lauren received a call from a man named Dr. Howard Mendez, a senior behavioral consultant at the North Willamette Canine Therapy Center. He had a warm voice, tinged with curiosity. The center had been tracking Max's history, and through mutual contacts, had learned of Bailey's emergence. "I believe you're working with a golden retriever named Bailey, Doctor?" Mendez asked. "Yes." "That's right," Lauren replied. "We reviewed our records," he continued. "Bailey was in our satellite training program about 4 years ago. Part of a community pilot initiative. He didn't complete full certification, but his assessments showed remarkable aptitude for emotional support, particularly with children." "That's rare." Lauren leaned back in her chair. "So, he was partially trained?" "Exactly, enough to respond intuitively, enough to bond deeply." Lauren remembered how Bailey seemed to shift his energy depending on who was near. She thanked him and hung up, her mind racing that afternoon. She called a meeting with Sarah, Angela, and the Bennetts. They sat in the shelter's small conference room, its walls lined with donation plaques and faded photos of adopted animals. Outside the glass window, Bailey lay beneath a maple tree, paws crossed, eyes half closed as if sensing everything. "I'd like to propose something," Lauren began. "It's unconventional, but I think Bailey is telling us something we haven't fully heard yet." She shared the update from Dr. Mendez. Then she looked at both families. Bailey has connected deeply with both Elsie and Noah, and I don't believe he needs to be forced to choose. Angela blinked. Are you saying, I'm saying we try shared guardianship, Lauren said. A structured co-care program. One household provides Bailey's permanent base, and the other receives regular scheduled visits. We work with the therapy center to ensure training continuity. Bailey isn't just a companion, he's a bridge, a healer. I believe he's meant to serve both children. The room fell quiet. Ann Bennett spoke first. Elsie's been through a lot, but I've never seen her accept loss like she did when we left Bailey. Maybe part of her knew she wasn't losing him completely. Angela looked down at her hands. Noah hasn't asked for anything in months, but he started writing last night. He wrote a letter to someone named Elsie. Lauren's eyes widened. He did. Angela nodded and pulled the paper from her purse. It was creased and written in shaky pencil. Hi, I'm Noah. I think Bailey knows you too. Maybe you can come play with us. I can show you the quiet spot under the big tree. Bailey likes it there. Noah. Claire smiled. Elsie will love that. Elsie. Sitting quietly beside her mother. Looked up. Can I write back? Angela reached over and squeezed her hand. By the end of the week, Lauren had arranged a soft launch of the shared care model. Bailey would remain with the Campbells as his primary home, with weekly visits scheduled at the shelter for Elsie to spend time with him. The long-term goal was alternating weekends, supported by the therapy center's framework. The first shared visit happened under the same maple tree Bailey liked to nap beneath. Elsie arrived with a backpack full of art supplies and a tin of peanut butter treats. Noah was already there, sitting cross-legged with a small blanket spread across the grass. When Elsie approached, Bailey rose and wagged his tail, an even rhythm now, not torn, but content. The children sat on either side of him. Bailey, as if understanding his role exactly, lay down between them, resting his head gently across both laps. It was the kind of spring morning that arrived with clarity, as if the air itself had been washed clean overnight. A thin breeze fluttered through the poplar trees lining the east fence of the Willow Creek Animal Outreach Center, carrying with it the faint scent of wildflowers and wood shavings. In the open courtyard where Bailey had once paced silently, now stood a wooden arch wrapped in handmade ribbons, under which families gathered, children laughed, and hope wove itself between every pair of eyes watching the golden-furred dog lying proudly at the center of it all. Bailey. His coat brushed to a radiant sheen, and a new navy blue vest strapped around his chest. Bore the patch, a certified community therapy dog, at 6 years old. He had become something more than anyone at the shelter had expected, a symbol not just of healing, but of shared strength. Today, the Outreach Center was holding a community celebration. Bridges, not walls, the Bailey story. Lauren stood to the side of the temporary stage, clipboard in hand, trying not to cry. She wore a simple dress under a denim jacket, her copper hair falling in soft waves for once around her. Volunteers bustled with folding chairs and baked goods, and local families wandered through the kennels, curious about adoption and therapy dog initiatives. But what mattered most today wasn't the turnout, it was the connection. Bailey had returned not just to one family, but to two, and he had made them one. Noah sat on a picnic blanket under the arch, wearing his favorite red t-shirt and a pair of sneakers that lit up faintly whenever he moved next to him. Elsie knelt cross-legged, her brown curls clipped back with a daisy-shaped barrette. They were both holding sketchbooks. Between them, Bailey lay quietly, his head shifting from one lap to the other, as if sensing balance in physical proximity, since beginning their shared guardianship schedule. The two children had become inseparable. The therapy sessions, once delicate and measured, had transformed into free-flowing afternoons of drawing, reading, and laughter. Bailey's presence wasn't the magic. The magic was what he enabled. Trust, expression, stability. Elsie had begun leading a weekly art group at the shelter, something Lauren had encouraged after noticing her natural gift with younger kids. She used colored pencils and kindness to guide others, often children struggling with anxiety or transitional homes. Noah had started speaking in full sentences again, often while talking to Bailey, sometimes while explaining a drawing to Elsie. His mother, Angela, kept a notebook of every new word. I didn't realize. Angela had said one morning, while watching the children play, that healing could happen sideways, not forward, not backward, just side by side. The pilot program, initiated by Dr. Mendez at the North Willamette Canine Therapy Center, had now formally adopted Bailey's co-care structure into their documentation. They called it Dual Family Therapeutic Bonding, a mouthful that Sarah Reynolds had joked sounded like a sci-fi parenting manual. But behind the term was something human, a framework for connection that honored complexity. Sarah herself stood near the shelter gate, tall and quietly poised in her usual green vest, watching the crowd with a kind of inward pride. She had overseen dozens of adoptions, hundreds of animal transitions, but she had never seen anything ripple through the community quite like Bailey, after losing her own son. Sarah had once believed her role in children's lives was over, but seeing Noah, seeing Elsie, seeing them choose to grow not alone but together, rekindled something she hadn't expected. Continuity. The courtyard buzzed with low conversations and ambient music from a volunteer guitarist. Then the crowd parted slightly as a new arrival entered. A woman in her early 40s with dark curls, round glasses, and a golden retriever by her side. The dog was older, slightly grayed around the muzzle, and walked with measured dignity. Lauren's breath caught. Luna Rachel Martinez nodded, her eyes glinting. She's retired. But when she heard Bailey had a graduation party, she insisted. Luna had once been Noah's therapy dog. It was her quiet loyalty and patient presence that had helped him begin his journey toward healing, before her retirement and before Bailey. Now, seeing her again was like watching two branches of the same tree reach toward each other. Bailey stood, tail low, steps careful. He approached Luna, and the two golden retrievers touched noses. There was no barking, no play wrestling, just an acknowledgement, like two souls recognizing kin. The crowd hushed as Lauren stepped forward and tapped the mic. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Some of you know Bailey as a rescue, others as a friend. But today, we honor him as something more. A bridge between families, a healer without a single home, and proof that love can multiply when we stop trying to divide it. Applause rose and echoed off the shelter's red brick walls. Later that evening, as the sky shifted into a pale pink dusk and families began to leave, Lauren sat with Dr. Mendez at the edge of the courtyard. He was in his late 50s, round-faced and soft-voiced, wearing a gray blazer that didn't quite match his khakis. He had a way of nodding slowly, as if agreeing with a thought before it was even finished. You know, he said, watching Bailey sleep between the children. We never planned for this kind of model. We thought structure meant stability, turns out. Shared affection can be just as powerful. Lauren smiled. Sometimes love doesn't need a fence. The event closed with the children releasing paper lanterns into the sky, each one marked with a single word: healing, friendship, family, courage. As the lights drifted upward, Bailey stood between Noah and Elsie, watching them until they disappeared. Sometimes, God's greatest miracles don't come in thunder or lightning. They come in the quiet footsteps of a dog who chooses to love. Even after being left behind, Bailey's journey reminds us that healing doesn't always happen in one home, one moment, or one heart. Sometimes, healing is shared, and in that sharing, something divine is born, a family not built by blood, but by grace. In our everyday lives, we are often too busy to notice the small wonders, like a child's smile after months of silence, or a dog laying gently between two hurting hearts. But perhaps those are the very moments when heaven touches earth. Bailey was more than a rescue. He was a message, a reminder that love, when given freely, multiplies, that no wound is too deep for God to mend, that sometimes what we think we lost is actually the beginning of something far greater. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us what part moved you most. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of faith, healing, and unexpected love. And if you believe, like we do, that every act of kindness brings us closer to God's plan, comment Amen to say a prayer for all the children, animals, and families still waiting for their miracle. May God bless you, and may your heart always remain open to the unexpected ways He chooses to heal.